Hi, my leader.
Good evening, my leader. Good
How
evening.
are you?
Very well, very well. Happy Spring Day.
Happy Spring Day. Guess we'll wait for a couple of people to join.
Great.
You ready?
You can never be ready.
Yeah, I guess we can never be ready. Let me just probably switch on the bit of the light.
The nerves are always there, my leader. There's nothing we can do.
Yeah, they're always there. But it's normal. That's what you've taught me, right?
Yes, indeed, leadership. Indeed. Indeed.
Did you join directly from
Sorry, I lost you there.
my leader?
Yes, I went directly from my page.
Okay. Maybe people are struggling to dial in. Oh, there we go. Hello, Nikki. Welcome. Guess I'll just play some music shortly while the people are still trickling in. I think we'll just give it about 10 minutes. Hi, Morare. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Candace. Hi, Sam. So I can't really tell how many people are online because on my screen it's showing one person. So I guess let's just start at 6:10, just to give a few people to join, and then we'll start the session.
Okay.
Hey, Malina, let's just kick start. We did set the time for 6, and we've got like an hour and a half to go. So I guess people will be trickling in, and maybe people are still wrapping up their day anyways. Good evening, everyone, and happy Spring Day, and welcome to our leadership conversation with the man himself, Mr. Lincoln Mali. Tonight, we'll be discussing the topic, the imposter syndrome. I know it's a very touchy topic. I guess everybody has probably been through that themselves. So tonight we're going to unpack the topic. If you have any questions, any comments, please drop them by on the comment box. We are here to learn from each other, share your stories, your experiences. There's no right or wrong question. We will tackle every question as best as we can. By way of introduction, my name is Lebo. Full name, Lebogang Morare. It's on a girl from the East Rand in a small town called Springs. I am just passionate about leadership, specifically looking at young leadership. I'm a young leader myself. I'm still, maneuvering myself along this journey. And I guess my passion leads to young people development. And I guess this is what gave birth to our partnership with Mr. Mali himself. He's passionate about leadership. I guess everybody has seen in social media, some people have experienced actually his leadership style. So tonight, he has graced us with his time. He's going to share his own experiences. Please be engaged, as I said. Don't let this be about me. I am going to talk less tonight. I'm going to leave it over to you guys to actually ask those questions that are burning that you may have. I've already introduced myself, and as I said, this partnership is just to bring those leadership discussions amongst ourselves. I guess sometimes we suffer in silence, and this is just to break that silence and do something really about it. We aim to just bring those conversations. And, if there's any tools that we can take out of these discussions, that is also as a starting point. So I'll give it over to Mr. Mali to give a brief intro about himself. I don't think I'll do justice if I were to introduce you, my leader. So over to you.
Melita, thank you so much. My name is Lincoln Mali. I am a father, I'm a husband, I am, from Port Elizabeth in the Eastern Cape. And I have this passion about leadership, and I've been passionate about how to help the next generation of leaders to navigate the challenges they face in the workplace. And I think this partnership over a while has helped because people like Lebu know how young people relate to us as leaders, and also give us the platforms to have these conversations. So, probably 2 years ago, I would never have thought we would have these conversations on Facebook or any of these things. But through these partnerships, we've been able to kind of create an environment where we can have these conversations. And what they are just conversations. This is not about getting the right answers. This is not about my way is the right way. It's about sharing. I will share my stories. I'll share my perspectives and things I've seen. And I'm sure there are also other people with some great stories so that we can help one another navigate life in the corporate sector and in the public sector, and those who are also running businesses as entrepreneurs. So that is what we're here about.
Thank you, my leader. I think one thing to just describe you, I would use one word, authentic. And I guess a lot of people in the platform could actually probably agree with me with that regard. But thanks for the intro, my leader. So tonight, as I said, for those who've just joined, and a warm welcome, we're discussing the topic, the imposter syndrome. If we were to unpack this, like you have a sense of self-doubt, you're always questioning whether you're good enough. You could be starting a new role and you're feeling inadequate, or you are challenged in terms of from a race, from a gender, from a religion perspective, and the imposter syndrome creeps in. And we just want to know, how do we navigate, or what are the things that we need to be cognizant of as we face with that challenge, right? And for me, my leader, I think that would be, let's just start there. Let's just break down what is an imposter syndrome. And I'd like you to unpack it for us, my leader, based on your experience, based on some observations that you've had, with people that you've led, or from your colleagues as well, or past colleagues or current colleagues, that you have seen this play out in itself?
Yes, my leader, I'll give you a couple of scenarios. The first scenario I would like to start with is mine. I've been in roles where after the bosses have told me that you're going to do this job, and they shake hands and they're happy, and I come home, I tell my family, they all celebrate. From there on, I can't sleep because I'm now saying, oh my word, what if I fail? What if I'm not cut out for this? What if I'm going to be a disaster? How will I deal with the first meeting with the team? Will the team accept me? Am I the right person for the job? And all of those are things that you go through as a person. And sometimes you overcompensate by trying to work too hard or trying so much because you have these internal with the idea that they are not worthy. They are not the right person for this job, and they are not able to take up this opportunity. Sometimes it happens also when people already don't have a strong sense of self-worth and they go to a meeting or they do a presentation and something goes wrong in a presentation, as things do go wrong in life, and people hang on to that mistake and define themselves with that mistake. I've seen that scenario. The last scenario I'll give you, and we've got a lot of time to talk about other scenarios, is where there's hostility or a toxic environment or an unaccepting environment, and somebody walks into that environment and either they've been promoted or they've been given a job, and the people in that environment do not welcome the person. It leads to anxiety. It leads to self-doubt. It leads to somebody believing that I'm not the right person for the job. And then they do something wrong, like we all do. And those doubters just confirm their prejudices and their own bigotry about that person, which then becomes a vicious cycle because the person doubts themselves even more. And they say, you see, we told you this person didn't qualify. So all of these are some of the scenarios that people go through when you think about this. So the concept itself was well researched in the past, and it was focused on very successful women and what made them being successful to have these doubts. But over time, you've seen that this is an emotion, a number of feelings that can affect anybody. But it does become more acute if either you're part of a minority or you're part of a group of people who's doubted, or you're fighting, the status quo, or you're different from everybody. So that would be maybe the first contextual answer I'll give about the syndrome. So I don't want people to be fixated on the syndrome itself, because it might not be the syndrome. It's more about the things we go through. And some of it might be the syndrome, some of them might be the environment, some of them might be mental health. But it's important to share those stories so that we know that most of us, I can say for myself, I've gone through that many a times in my career.
And my leader, I just want to go back. You've just mentioned the female component, and I want us to address that one, where you find as a female, within the workplace environment, if you're raising certain issues or challenges, we are quick to say that you're suffering from an imposter syndrome. I just want to hear from you as a male leader who's led some female teams. How have you worked around that, or what has been the journey with regards to that?
So I think the most important thing, I always say to people, it's not enough to say I have appointed a woman leader or have given a woman an opportunity, you have to be cognizant of the environment. Is the environment conducive to that woman to succeed and thrive? If it's not, then it's your responsibility to support and guide and sometimes protect, because the male chauvinism comes through, the bigotry comes through, the prejudices come through. And therefore, in that instance, there are things that I have to do more with the culture and the environment, which then leads to a feeling of inadequacy by the person.
Mm-hmm.
It is also true that you can find that somebody does feel inadequate by themselves, but then the culture exacerbates it. So there are different scenarios, but it doesn't absolve you as a leader of your responsibility to always sense check and check the climate of the environment in which you are appointing somebody. Many years ago, Sispindi, she is now retired this year. She was the first person I ever appointed as a female in 2001 in Zimbabwe as the CEO of our bank. And the context of it was that she was probably one of the first, if not the first, woman CEO in Zimbabwe. And the circumstances around which she was appointed were themselves controversial, because when she was appointed, the board resigned en masse. There were newspaper articles throughout about this appointment and the problems that were going on at Stanbic Zimbabwe. So in that environment, the context was already poisoned. And so my job was to journey with Sipindi to make sure that she succeeds by reconstituting the board, by engaging with management, engaging with the regulators, and then give her the space to then be who she is. And she's one of the strongest people. But if I didn't understand the context, I wouldn't have given her that necessary support in the beginning to allow her to thrive. And she did an amazing job, in Zimbabwe as our CEO. And when she retired, she was running 6 or 7, countries or banks in different countries for the Standard Bank Group. So the context is very important. So you can't simply say as a leader, no, I know, it's just imposter syndrome and the runaway. Mm-hmm. In some instances, the trigger is the context, the trigger is the culture, the trigger is the environment that a person finds themselves in. Same as race. Sometimes you are appointed and you are the only person in the room who's black. I guess, at my age, those things were prevalent then. You get into a meeting and it would be very difficult. You want to say something and everybody looks and like, it speaks, So those things are part. Age is another factor where people are appointed to jobs and they're young. And then the context or the environment is already hostile because this person is taking a big job and they're young. So all of these things can lead or trigger the sense of doubt, the sense of feeling I'm an imposter, which means that the way sometimes you see yourself is worse than the way the other people see you.
Madido, you were touching on the triggers, right? So at sometimes it happens that you don't even realize that you're experiencing the imposter syndrome. And let me just probably relay a story, a personal story, I guess, right? Where you are you seem to be given this task, or you are in a new role, and you carry on and journey on and you're doing the work. However, you find yourself that you are seeing mistakes, you're seeing the flaws. And obviously that brings a bit of high amount of anxiety. And obviously you start becoming challenges even from a health perspective. So I want us to get into the triggers, right? Because there's various triggers that can actually bring that about. What have you seen as being the triggers?
So let's take one of the worst examples. There are times where in corporates, people will appoint somebody because of their race, because they have to fill in BE scores. So the leader does not believe in the person and even calls the person an EE candidate. Or the person says, I'm meant to appoint women, so I'm appointing this woman, but I don't actually believe in the person. So as you start on a very difficult and negative footing because you don't have support from your line manager. And what then happens is that you begin to doubt yourself. You can see you're not being accepted. And then you make a mistake. And the person pounces, uses the mistake to confirm their bias that you were the wrong appointment anyway. And then your life becomes one of misery. You are now doubting yourself, you're trying hard and all of that. So that's an example where the trigger is the lack of trust and belief in you by a line manager. Let's take another trigger. The line manager has appointed you together with whatever committee, but your teammates do not believe in you for whatever reasons. Either they thought somebody else should have got the job, or they think that you got the job because of your looks, because of your age, or because of your race, or whatever the reason is. And the environment becomes toxic against you. That becomes a trigger, because then all your confidence goes and you're battling now to please this team. You're battling to fit in. People withhold information. They don't tell you things, or they tell you wrong things. That can be another trigger. The third trigger is an environment where the environment is so competitive in such a way that it's cutthroat. So people will do anything to get to the top, which means that the environment itself is toxic. And therefore, you either are competing or you're surviving. And therefore, sometimes you change who you are to try and fit in, but you don't fit in. So all of those things are part of that. The other ones are where you are different. Let's say you belong to the religion of Islam, and the people in the environment do not accept Islam as a religion, or do not understand Islam, or have a jaundiced view on Islam. And now you are battling to be who you are and practice your faith and come as you are. These are part of things that people battle with. So your sense of confidence, actually goes. Gender becomes an issue where, again, the stereotypes come about women, where there's no acceptance that you are competent, you are capable, and then you start to have your own doubts. So all of these ones I'm talking about are all contextual ones. We'll still come to when it comes to our own challenges, even if when the context is not the issue. But the context plays a big role in either supporting somebody or kind of destroying somebody in the process.
I just want to remind our audience that if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. I will certainly read the questions out to Mr. Mali. I just want to read some of the comments that have been coming through, my leader. So Penny says, absolutely agree. In my personal experience, the culture and the inconducive environment was the trigger. And Naima says, when you mention context and triggers, it makes so much sense now. So my leader, we've touched the triggers, right? You get various types of imposter syndromes as well. You know, I myself suffered, I was a perfectionist. Can you take us through some of the other types that you actually get before we even get to a point of, you know, it's good and well, we see these triggers, but the question is, how do we then get to solution mode? How do we manage, or, you know, how do we manage the imposter syndrome in itself?
I think sometimes, my leader, we are not kind to ourselves. Those who are perfectionists want everything to be perfect, and they plan for everything to go well and don't leave enough room for disappointment. In life, things sometimes don't go well, and therefore you have to build a sense of resilience for when things don't go well. So the perfectionists sometimes define themselves on the perfection, so that when something goes wrong, it's not that thing that's gone wrong. It's me. I failed. I'm a failure. I'm not up to that standard. Instead of saying, yes, I did not meet that standard, and these were the reasons. This is where I can improve. Get back to your horse and ride on. But if you now make that mistake a symbol around your neck, all it does, it drags you down. It drags you down all the time. So perfection is one of the things where somebody who's a perfectionist, they battle with these things because they've made a mistake or something didn't go so well. You know, think of the best demos in the world. One done by Steve Jobs one day, and the demo didn't work. We're still talking about great Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was not defined by that mistake or that thing that didn't go that day. That's life. Life comes with all of these challenges. Two, we have situations where we have people with a low self-esteem. Sometimes it comes from an upbringing where you were never given a sense of worth. You were always talking down to or pushed that you are not really something good. So you don't actually believe when the bosses say you're doing a good job. You then, the imposter syndrome says, I'm just lucky. The job bosses are saying, they're good again. You say, I'm sure in the fourth time they're going to find a mistake. And you find those people, when I relate to them, let's say I've seen them in their business or they made a presentation or something. After the presentation or after the visit, I'll give my views, comments about how great things went. And then they say, yeah, but please tell me where I went wrong. I said, but you didn't go wrong. No, there has to be something that went wrong. Because they've not been affirmed. And so in that instance, we need more affirmation. We need more friends and relatives and people you can talk to who can affirm you, because there can't be somebody who's perpetually wrong and doesn't do well. The third one is sometimes where there is so much expectation on you. Growing up, you are acing everything. Varsity, you are flying. Then you get to the workplace and things don't go because at varsity you were the top student. Now you come in a corporate, you are a grad. You're seen as the lowest. And then suddenly the confidence crumbles. All right. So all of these things are different scenarios that play themselves out. Then the fourth one, which is slightly more complex because it would probably need its own time. And we've spoken about it in different platforms. It's the issue of mental health. If you are a person who suffers from mental health, particularly depression or anxiety, you are naturally anxious about things and about life. People who don't suffer from anxiety don't understand that a person who's anxious is anxious about something that you think, what are the chances of that happening? But that's not you. It's how that person feels. So if that person is anxious that things go well, I'm anxious that things are not going to go well. If the context then creates doubt, it magnifies the anxiety. it triggers the anxiety to be much more, right? Or if somebody suffers with depression and you as a line manager don't understand their triggers, you put them in an environment where their depression is worse. Some people are triggered by stress. Some people are triggered by pressure. Some people are triggered by harsh, cruel words. Some people are triggered by just what you say about them. So somebody can get a horrible email at work. Everything looks perfect. You think this person has got all of that, all sorted, but you can't see the mind. We can empathize with a broken leg because it's physical, we can see it. But a broken heart and a broken mind, you can't see. That person gets that email, it triggers something, and then somebody's in a spiral. And then the doubts come. And that email is just before they go and make a presentation or before they go into an interview. And so these are some of the things we've had to deal with, because I keep on saying the thing we should be experts on as leaders is to know more variety of people, not to be the experts on the job, because there are people who should be doing that. So that you have to understand how people are different. People are very different.
Yeah. You know, my leader, you touched on one aspect, because I think we've spoken about, where you're doing, it's a bit of the self-awareness. We're trying to unpack identifying the imposter syndrome, what are the triggers, but there's another element, because now we're touching on the other side where you are leading a team of people. You should be able to know the people that you are leading so that you can understand their triggers. And I like what Gladwin is actually asking. I think I'm gonna jump onto his question because it feeds off to what I wanted to say. He says, how does one practically and constructively deal with subtle oppression imposed on us by superiors and or peers, either because of gender, ethnicity, or perhaps religious beliefs, and not necessarily because of performance-related issues?
This is very specific to each individual because it depends on your willingness to fight and how much you have to lose in that fight. I never judge people who don't fight, who flee, because I don't know what their circumstances are. But throughout my career, wherever I've seen injustice, wherever I've seen prejudice, wherever I've seen discrimination, I challenge it. I've done it all my life. It's probably cost me a lot career-wise, but I sleep well at night because I'm not defined by the corporate titles. I'm defined by my conscience and the value system that I have. So whenever I've dealt with these things and people have come to me and I say, okay, can I help you fight this? It becomes difficult because the person says, Lincoln, is it worth it? This is going to be a long, protracted thing because it's subtle. I have no tangible proof. And then I say, give me the closest to the tangible. Closest to the tangible, so that at least I do something. In some, I sometimes would get somebody writing to me and tell me how they think they've been treated. Then I go to that person because sometimes the people put on a face that they are like this, and then they meet me and I'm, hey, my leader, how are you? I'm like, hey, my leader, how are you? Can I talk to you? Actually, my leader, I got a very terrible report about you, about the way, oh, no, Lincoln, me, there's no way I could do that. I'm just saying, my leader, it's not about names. I'm just asking you to treat everybody the way you would like to be treated. Treat everybody with respect and dignity. And there is no employer who employs anybody who's below the age of 18. So there are no children in the workplace. Don't treat people like children. So, but where I always battle is where you now have to take the action. Because unless Gladwell is willing to be there and give testimony, it becomes hard. And sometimes even when Gladwell wants to give testimony, Gladwell remembers there are 2 or 3 other guys who stood up and they're out. And that person who did all of this is still in the company. Or sometimes HR, which is meant to be the custodian of the values of an organization, is the henchman for leaders of getting people out. And so these are some of the challenges that many organizations. And so the only weapon, Gladwell, I think, that is still open to everybody is naming and shaming. Because I think that we've not done enough of naming and shaming. Because what social media does do is that it gives you also the opportunity to say something without saying names. And suddenly, a group of people say, we also agree. Because sometimes we as leaders, we parade here, we look good, but back there, we are destroying people's lives. So sometimes exposing people is good. Sometimes calling anonymously 702 as a group of employees and say, in that company of ours, there's something that's happening. At least the CEO of that company also listen to 702. Maybe there could be an investigation. Because sometimes that investigation is not there. So these are some of the things I'm throwing out there because, as I say, I can't be specific without knowing the special circumstances. All I know is that when it's subtle, it is more difficult. And it makes it more difficult for the employee to take it up, especially when the corporate culture does not take a hard stance on things like this.
And I see you've excellently answered that as per what Gladwin is saying there. Another question that came through, this is from Candace, and she says, how does one sift between the syndrome and the reality?
Hey, Candice, this is hard because where it starts, Candice, is you've got to know yourself and accept yourself for who you are. Because that allows you to have an internal locus of control about who you are and not allow it to be defined by others as a general statement. Now, Candice and I worked together for many years, and Candice and I like colorful clothes. So Candice and I, where we work together, we used to wear colorful clothes. And I'm sure people would make unkind comments about those things. But it wouldn't make myself and Candice to wear dark clothes because people have views about that. But on a serious note, if Candice knows who she is and her strengths and everything, that is her anchor. Now comes the syndrome when she's been given a different job, or she's got a new challenge, or there are people who are treating her badly or saying things about her. The syndrome allows her to see a different picture of herself, which is not the picture she knows. That's when my advice is now know that the syndrome is working. And then you have to step back, either through friends who know you well or through a conversation with yourself to get back to, I'm Candice, I'm colorful, I'm bubbly, I'm this. If somebody doesn't accept it, that's their problem. So I think that knowing yourself, believing in yourself is fundamental. Because when that alternative view comes, either as a trigger from outside or your own fears, you get back to knowing who you are. And then you get back your center of gravity about who you are. So whenever I have faced this challenge, I build these scenarios of negativity in my mind. And for a couple of days or weeks, they are accentuated. But when I have a moment to either share with somebody or ground it, when I have my own conversation, or when I share here at home and tell my wife, this is how I'm feeling, and she tells me to get alive, then I come back to the reality that actually, this is who I am. I'll give you two scenarios. One scenario was in a company where I worked. I was asked to look after all the channels of the organization. I had been looking after physical channels. I understood that world. Now I was going to look after the digital channels as well. And I was introduced by a dear friend of mine, Morare, to her team. And I couldn't speak. I was tongue-tied. And Tumi was having a field day to say, I've never seen you quiet. I couldn't speak. I was overwhelmed because I wasn't sure whether the team would accept me or embrace me. Right? And when I was sharing the conversation with Tumi, she was able to give me comfort that you've got this. You can do this. Another example, I was asked to look after card and payments, which is a very technical environment. The first 3 months were a nightmare. The syndrome was playing havoc. I was trying to understand every technical thing that you can imagine. But in the third month, I said, no. They didn't choose you because of your technical abilities. They chose you because of your leadership abilities. Go back to your strengths and lead that way. And over time, the team taught me the technical things I needed to understand. I was able to impart the leadership things that I could. And for 5 years, we journeyed together. So it does happen that you get those moments. Or you're joining a new team, you doubt whether they've accepted you. You build stories in your mind whether, they don't think I'm the right person. You build all of that. So Candice, knowing thyself, as the Oracle of Delphi says, know thyself is very important, because the locus of control is internal. You are not defined by others, and more particularly, which is good for me and Candice, because we've always said this thing: you bring yourself to work. A lot of people battle with that. They come into work and they put in a corporate mask that they think is needed for them to be successful. And this mask is not who they are. And they live the entire day at their work in the public sector or corporate or company they have as this corporate image or mask. And then when they leave, they're a different person. So I chose in my life very early to be the same person. I'm like this with my friends. I'm like this at work. I'm like this at home. I'm just the same person. So if somebody comes and then has their own views about me, I've been told a leader mustn't behave like this and an executive mustn't behave like this. And I say, my name is not executive. My name is Lincoln or Lincoln, depending on who you went to. If I am fired by that organization, I'll still remain Lincoln or Lincoln. I'm not defined by the type of that organization. So this idea of putting on a corporate mask to be successful adds to this thing, because you're taking your biggest strength, who you are, and you're hiding it. And then you're bringing out this weak replica of somebody. Sometimes you're a replica of your leader, replica of your manager. For what? Be who you are. Be proud about who you are. And show up as who you are.
There's just to leverage off of that comment, my leader. So Lebogang goes, I understand this so well. So what if your colorful self is not accepted well? However, the dull corporate mask is supported much better. It's very hard.
It's very hard. And this is where there is a personal choice you have to make at some point. That how much are you willing to compromise? How much are you willing to give up? Because you may get success by being darker to be acceptable. But the more you move up, you are moving up as being known as darker. But your true self is colorful. So in that instance, you are really going to be an imposter. Because the true you is hidden under this corporate mask. And then you live a double life. Outside, you're colorful. Inside, you're dull and all of that. So you have to navigate those things. I'm not saying challenge everything every day. Of course, when I was younger, I did that all the time. I was getting into trouble. But I'm just saying that the things that are core to you, you have to be clear what you are willing to compromise on, what you're not willing to compromise on. If your spirituality is important to you, are you prepared to sacrifice it? Because it's not acceptable in this place. That's a choice. If you think that there should be equity in life between men and women, and the boss is a chauvinist pig, are you prepared to accept the sexist jokes, the sexual harassment, because it's successful? So all of these things are very important. They allow us to be our true self. So if you've made that decision, then it's fine. You live with it, whatever the decision is. But you must know what decision have you made. If you've made a Faustian pact that says, for me to succeed, I am going to be dull, it's okay. That's a choice. But I took a different route in my career. I just chose to be who I am, and I've continued to be who I am, regardless of the consequences, because I'm not defined by where I work or the position I hold. I am who I am because I am me.
Yeah.
So when you asked me, I said I was a husband, a father, I am a brother, a friend, a leader. That's what I am. The titles don't define who I am, or where I work don't define who I am.
I love that. You always go by, I'm a leader without a title, as you always say. And I just want to read one quote, and I think this is one of the quotes you sent to me, because I struggle with the imposter syndrome, and I think it's something that I'm trying to manage as I journey along my career journey. And you said, the quote says, "Strange, isn't it? You know yourself better than anyone else, yet you crumble at the words of someone who hasn't even lived a second of your life. Focus on your own voice. It's the only one that matters." I just want to move.
Because
Yes, my leader.
yeah, because think about it that way. I mean, we live in a world where there are opinions about us on social media, at work, family members, whatever. Now, if you are this person who just absorb every feedback from everybody, all that happens is that you are left with nothing. There's an old story, and at my age, we tell stories of an old man and a young man who were walking in the villages of the Transkei, and they were on a donkey, and the people in that village complained, "Why are the two of them on a donkey? That is cruel." They thought that this was a good idea. The old man went down and pulled the donkey, and the young man was on top. They went to the second village. They said, "Look at these children. How can they allow an old man?" They thought this was a good idea. They swapped. The next village, then they said, "How can this old man be doing this and the child?" By the time they went to the last village, they were carrying the donkey. So the idea is all opinions have got some value, all feedback has got some value, but it is you who attaches the final value. You attach the final value. We have a pen in life to write our stories. Don Miller, a great friend of mine, says this. What are you writing with your pen? Because if you're giving your pen to others, they are writing your story. Write your story. Stand up for who you are. Yes, it's good to get feedback from others. But if you're always just allowing everybody to write your story, you then are not, you are not who you are. You are depending on the number of likes. You are depending on the number of, I don't know, those social media things. Yeah. But if you're defined by those things, then you end up losing who you are.
So true, my leader. And my leader, I'm not going to catch you off guard, right? There's a lady I think you also know her, by the lady of Kotatso. I'm just going to ask her to request to join on the call, just for her to just share a bit of her experience, her own personal story, and I think some people could relate to it. Kotatso, can you just request to join on the call, and then Mr. Mali will accept you on his side? So whilst KG is joining, my leader, there's a question that's coming from Mr. Simpio Pagati, which is another great leader that I've worked with personally as well, and I've learned quite a lot. And he says, such a profound discussion, which is more relevant in the times we live in, considering the transition to remote ways of work and embracing the diverse nature of people. How does one sense or pick up where people need help, especially in this virtual and remote way of work?
Sim, it's great to have you on the call, and I echo those words. Sim is a genuine, leader, quite impactful, in the environment where he finds himself. And I think, Sim, we've all had to learn to relate very differently, because these mediums, we didn't grow up with them. When people hear me now talk on Facebook and whatever, they didn't know the tutoring I needed to get from people like Lebu about how to do this, press that, my leader. No, don't press that one. You are alive, all of those things. So let's take that analogy and use it about the team. In the work context in the past, you needed to see and touch your people and have a feel of how they are and get a sense of the pulse of your team. That's how we got to know whether the morale was down, the mood was low, and so on. Now you don't have that. You now have Teams, you have Zoom. But I'm saying, let's flip the script and say we must be better at using other things we used to use when we grew up. So, Sim, I'm sure that before you were married, you could tell on the phone whether your partner was happy with you or not. You could tell whether the conversation was warm or not. You could tell whether the person is okay or not. It was just a medium. A telephone call at varsity, you could still do it while you're doing toggle. Toggle, where you are trying to do that thing illegal, or phoning, right? You could find how the other person is on the other side. Letters that people used to write, people through letters could tell how the other people were. Nelson Mandela has got an entire book of his letters that he wrote. So my point is that we have to shift and accept that the mediums we have are what we've got now. We must make those mediums to be the best and not yearn to go back to the mediums we know or remember, because we don't know when we're going to go back to those mediums. So my style, which I think some of the people on the call here will know, I always check up on people. I either will call or send a text, just checking how are people, how are you. And in the text, I can tell sometimes that this response is not good. Then I ask the person, how are you? So I think our job as leaders now is to use these mediums we've got. Not through the meeting, because the meeting sometimes is just too many people, but at an individual level. When we're having the one-on-ones, start again with the how are you? How is your family? Because people have lost a lot. People have lost jobs. People have lost friends, businesses, and so on. People, those who suffer from mental health, it's gone way because they're now dealing with this thing. Those who live alone and have suffered from mental health are also dealing with all of these things. So we are now being asked to be more compassionate, to have more empathy, to sense more as leaders. So therefore, let's say the mediums we have, we must now use them more, but use them for the same things we used to do, where we could pull somebody in an office and sit with them, or go around their desk and chat with them. Let's use these mediums to do so. And that's what I do, certainly with my teams. I don't want there to be a difference between the time when we didn't have what's the word, we didn't have COVID. I remember in the last job I had, in the last company I was working for, there was something I started where every day for 2 months I would send a message to the staff, a video message. And we did it for 2 months. And every day I had to think about what is I'm going to say today, and made sure that everybody got it, and checked on people, and people we could relate to and talk about things. Others were going through difficult things in their families. I could journey with them, but I was stuck on a farm in the Eastern Cape, but I could still be with them. I could talk to them. They said, our sister has got COVID, or my mother has got COVID, or I've just lost my uncle. It is in those conversations. So I'm saying that let's use what we've got now and make them better. And new innovative ways are going to come through that. But it starts from here. Let's lead with the heart, and then we will navigate the technology.
I love that. Lead from the heart. My leader, I see KG is trying to request the invites. Just see if it comes through. KG, please request.
It has come through.
Okay.
It has not come through.
It has not come through.
Yeah. It does not come through.
Okay. KG, please request, and then let's see, and let's just give it one more try, and see if you can be able to join on the call. Nothing has come through, right, Malika?
No, nothing.
Nothing. Okay. Let's just continue. We'll keep on trying. Just to read some of the comments that's coming through. This is coming from Situtuzo. It's always difficult to join a new team. Today was my first day, and I must applaud my new manager for making it a smooth transition. I think also the way you are introduced or presented to the team always plays a major role and helps with building confidence. I echo the same sentiments there. The next one is coming from Steve Mutuba. Shout out to you, Uncle, for joining. But there seems to be a conundrum in what you're saying about being who you are, because you get influenced by what you read and do research on. Even great influential people like Warren Buffett stresses the need to read extensively, and therefore who you are is going to be influenced by what you read to an extent. Just my thoughts. Do you want to add on there, my leader?
I think lifelong learning is important. I think that equipping yourself with more knowledge is important. But there's also something else we underestimate. That is learning from others, listening. You know, where I used to work in a previous company, I really didn't have an office, and I had most of my meetings in the canteen. And most people wondered why would this person have his meetings in the canteen? But the canteen gave me a number of things. The first one was it made me visible. So that if somebody wanted to have a meeting with me and they see, he's having a meeting with Lebu. If he can have a meeting with Lebu, I can also send a meeting request. Two, it also made me to have the pulse of the organization because people are free there. There's no hierarchy. It's a canteen, right? Thirdly, you got to hear people's stories all the time. And there is much learning from listening to others. God had a plan to give us 2 ears and only one mouth. And as leaders, unfortunately, we want to do the inverse. Right? Sensing is very important. Listening is very important as leaders. So it's very important to learn from others. So yes, reading is very important. Academics are very important. Studying is very important. But learning from other people and journeying with them is an amazing thing. I remember I'm one of the laziest guys. I saw somebody there, Maud. Maud and them belong to a team, and Maud is a runner. And I only run when there's something chasing me. But when I got into COVID, I realized that my physical health was very important. And Maud and them had a group that they'd created. That group was my lifeline. I learned so much from them. I was a part of that group. And every day, if I'd walked 5 or 10 kilometers, we would post on that group and we would be inspired. That was learning from others. So your ability to learn from others is a very important skill. And I want to say to Sutuzo, congratulations in his new job. Well done, Small. I always knew you were destined for great things, my leader. Well done.
The next question comes from Sina. Lincoln, as leaders, we are expected to remain relevant, and we always use past and present as a measure of success. How do we remain relevant for the future and take the people and organizations that we serve on that journey? Simply put, what must we do to remain in this new normal?
You know, Sina, I mean, it's so important to try and understand where are the people who are already ahead of us in what we're dealing with. You know, I listen to the average South African say, I wish we don't get the fourth wave. But in China, after they've done all of the things they've done, the COVID has come back with different variants today. New Zealand, which was exemplary in what it did, and Australia are now on hard lockdown as we speak. Right? So the point for me is, let's find out how are they dealing with what we are going to go through. Because what are the chances that we are not going to go through what they are going through? Wish is not a plan. You know, a wish is not a plan. We have to have a plan that says, what are the scenarios? So one of the things that I certainly do, Sina, in my life is work on scenario planning. As a leader, I also work on scenario planning for myself. So let me give you a sense of the scenarios I'm talking about. Let me start with scenarios about the workplace. I've worked out scenarios that says, if there's a hard lockdown again, what does this mean for this business? What levers are we going to pull? If we've got a semi-hard lockdown, what are we going to do? What levers are we going to pull? How can this business survive? What have we learned now? What have we done differently? All of these are scenarios that we plan so that when something arises, we are not caught off guard. And in that journey, I'm taking my staff with me. We're having these conversations. They are not easy because once I start talking about them, excuse me, they say, "Oh no, no, you are jinxing it, my leader. You know, my leader, you are sending these things to the universe." I'm saying, no, 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 no. I'm not sending anything to the universe. I'm saying we must plan for what would happen should this and that happen. So scenario planning is very important. And then adapting your business or foolproofing your business to change. Let's take another example. If I was a retailer, the riots that happened a few weeks ago should be telling me a story. Because now, even the people that were not going digital are finding other ways of going digital by necessity. So now, things that we thought were not going to be possible are now possible. So is your business going to be relevant? Is it going to be relevant in the future? So these are things that we have to deal with on a regular basis in our businesses and in our teams. So that scenario planning is very important, and take your teams with you. And you might find that your business might be disrupted fully by a lockdown, might be disrupted fully by a change in technology, might be disrupted fully by legislation, might be disrupted fully by new regulations. And what are the scenarios and what are you going to do? So that's the one part. Now that Sina has triggered this, I must also talk about a part that people don't want to talk about, which is scenario planning about ourselves. What if I get COVID? What's the plan around the house? Where am I going to isolate? We know there's COVID, but we're working on the wish that it doesn't get me. You know, but if it gets you, what's the plan? How do we treat COVID? How do we have that thing in the house when we're going to have COVID? What if Zva, my wife, gets COVID? How are we going to deal with that? What if both of us have COVID? How do the kids deal with that? That's one set of scenarios. It gets worse. What if I get retrenched or the company that I work for closes? What is my income stream that I have if that happens? What will I deal with? Or if, God forbid, I pass away, are the assets of the family protected? Have I have a policy against the house so that the house is not taken away? Do I have a will? Have I defined where I want to be buried? These are all things that are very complicated and very difficult. But all I'm saying is that if we're not talking about them, if we're not planning for them, they will happen to us. All we're saying is that rather, when outside things happen, they come, you are ready in some way or the other to find a way of responding. So, Sina, I'm not sure whether I've answered your question.
I think she'll put in the comment box if she's not answered there, my leader.
Thank you, madam.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I just want to bring another dynamic to it, right, my leader, that we learn from each other, whether we be colleagues, whether it be from family members, the list may go on, right? There's this notion that we're not out there looking for solutions to the problems that are facing us, especially as Africans, right? And when I say Africans, let's say in the construct of our country, but we are simply hustling to make more money to those problems that are no longer applying to us. What is your view on that?
So in other words, you're saying there's sometimes a disconnect,
yes,
between us and the market.
Correct.
Yes, no, this is a very powerful point, because our society has become more unequal in the last few years. We've seen higher levels of unemployment. high levels of underdevelopment, high levels of social inequality. And therefore, a society that is based on such levels of inequality and poverty is not sustainable. So, in a way, the disconnect is sometimes no longer a race one. It's a class one. Because we here are having this conversation on Facebook, which means we've got data or we've got Wi-Fi. And many of us on this platform have a job. But the latest results have told us that there are more South Africans unemployed, more South Africans taking grants, more South Africans who are battling with, diseases. So when we are planning, which world are we in? Are we in our world, which is cocooned? Or are we in the real world that the majority of South Africans find themselves in? That's fundamental, because there may be a disconnect. And the question arises that the best think tanks in South Africa could not predict the riots. The best minds in South Africa could not predict the riots. Why? Is it because we don't hear the cries of those who've got less, or have become numb to their cries? Or we understand what they're asking for, but it affects our interests? Whatever the reason is, if you look back at the Middle East, there was the Arab Spring because of discontent. If you look in the UK, there was Brexit. You look at the USA, Trump victory. The sense of a group of people that they feel that they're left behind. So all of us have to find a way of saying, how are we going to connect back to a part of South Africa that I think is drifting away, and an island of South Africa seems to be succeeding. Former President Thabo Mbeki used to call it the two South Africas. So we can't succeed unless we have an inclusive society. We cannot succeed unless we have shared growth, shared prosperity. So I challenge many of our professionals, particularly those who've come from these communities, to say, in the solutions you come with, do you really understand what goes on there? Or maybe you have ideas, but in the corporate sector, you've had to put on a mask and you agree with a decision that's made that really is affecting the people from where you come from. So there are all these kinds of things that are there. So you have to make decisions. I mean, I know, for example, in the company where I work now, we've made a big and bold decision to go build branches where the people are. This is going against the grain. The entire industry is closing branches and ATMs. I'm going against the grain. I'm saying, because I know what's going there. Those people are not running around with apps in the villages. They are still dealing with cash. And cash is growing. So mine is to find solutions to deal with that. But whilst I'm trying to find those solutions, I must deal with the fact that even if I send money to somebody through instant money, e-wallet, cash send, whatever, they will get that money in the village. All money is, as Sim will tell us, is data. It's data that says you got 300 rand.
Mm.
But now they have to take a taxi to go to town to go and take that money out of an ATM. But they want to spend the money in the village. So they've now gone and spend there. But you and I can go to a restaurant or a shop. We're just carrying a card. That data is in the card. Yeah. It says you've got 300 in the card and you can buy, and that store owner can take that. So the solutions we should be thinking about, which is I'm certainly challenging my team, how do we make sure that we have a way of taking the data from the client, whether it's in a wallet or in a card or on their phone, and the shop owner must also be able to accept that data so that the money is in that community. So this is examples where we are talking about what people's lived experience is, not what we see having been removed and only go home over holidays or weekends.
Wow. You've left me speechless there, and I think if everybody was on the call, I think we would have seen the facial expressions of everyone. Malida, I see that we've got about, if I'm correct on my side, we've got about 10 minutes left, and we come close to the end of our webinar. But as you ponder on, your last comments, I just want to share some reflections on, tonight's discussion. But as your last closing comments, I think for me, what we've seen even in the social media responses when we posted the poster is, you obviously want the tools as when you leave tonight's discussion, right? Practical applications of how do you deal or how do you manage the imposter syndrome. So while I'm reflecting on some of the things we've spoken about, I guess you can start thinking of those closing remarks before we close off. So I think for me, what stood out, obviously we unpacked about what is an imposter syndrome, identifying the triggers, the types of imposter syndrome, and also looking at some of the tools that we've touched on briefly. And I think the conversation then ended up actually expanding further to saying that, in the new norm that we're finding ourselves in, how do we navigate to thinking differently? But I just want to leave, our audience with this, and I think this is very important. Accept yourself for who you are, your authentic self, and don't be apologetic about it. Treat others how you want to be treated. If you know your strengths, and that in itself is your anchor. If you don't take out the true you, the imposter syndrome will creep in. And then lastly, which is my favorite one, what she said is, everybody has opinions. They'll give you feedback. However, you attach the final value to that response. And then always lead from the heart. I think those were the key things that stood out for me. And I'm sure for the people on the line, there's other components that actually stood out for them. And happy that you still share on the commentary box. But I'll give it over to you, my leader, to share your last closing comments or remarks that you may have while still harboring on, the practical application, the tools that you can utilize as we leave, of people who are either suffering from the imposter syndrome. How do they manage that?
So I think whenever you have these feelings, and again, I don't want us to put a big stock on the term imposter syndrome, but when you are feeling less confident, when you are feeling less worthy, when you are feeling fraudulent and you're feeling you're not good enough, and you've been given a new job, new opportunity, new project, or a new team, all of that, I want us to talk about the following things. The first one is acknowledge the feelings. Acknowledge that I'm going through this. People baba nitem abati ndiyagowa. Nobody ndiyagowa ngoku. Because it's a beginning of dealing with it. I'm doing that. Then find the right people to share with. People who know you, who can give you positive reinforcement. and say, but you are saying you're like this. Candice, you are saying like this. Candice, we know you're like this. Do not accept this because this is not who you are. So find those people that are able to give you the positive view, because your mind is playing with you at the time. It's giving you negative thoughts. You need somebody to give you the positive thoughts who knows you well. Then also, I think it's important to build connections with others. Seek support. Seek support. Whenever I've had an imposter syndrome, I've sought support, sometimes from my line manager. And it's amazing how many of us run away from the line manager. And think about it. Studuzo was telling us that he's been given a new job. I'm sure it's a promotion. I know how Studuzo is good. But instead of Studuzo worrying about whether he's good for the job, he's not asking that person. That person interviewed him. They chose him among many. And they didn't expect him to know everything on day one. But when Studuzo goes in doubt, he runs away from that very person who chose him. So seek guidance, seek support that's there. And then there have to be times where you have a workshop with yourself, where now there's a debate between this negative view that's dominating your mind and this other view that's really you. Because the negative thoughts are now dominant. You have to win over those dominant views because they are false. You know you're good. You know your experience. You know you got the qualifications and everything. But suddenly the negative thoughts are just telling you how useless you are. And you feed into it and it becomes a spiral. Please avoid comparing yourself to others. Sometimes we put ourselves under so much pressure. We don't know what boat that other person is in. We may face the same storm, yet we're in different boats. You don't know what boat that person is on. Navigate your boat so that you can get on the other side. That is very, very important. And for those who have mental health challenges, understand your triggers and know that each mental health challenge is different. Somebody might be anxiety, somebody else might be schizophrenia, somebody else might be depression. They're all different. But all of them, in some way, shape, or form, need a range of support. Fighting it alone is not going to help you. Some of it is your diet, some of it is your physical activity, some of it is counseling, some of it is your level of sleep, some of it is avoiding stress, all of those things. And then when you come to the workplace, then you must protect yourself against the triggers because you know what the triggers are. And when the triggers come unexpectedly, when there's an email, then move away from the toxic environment. Find a way of moving out of the toxic environment so that you can go rebuild your strength, so that you can fight again. Because it's a perpetual fight with your mind. Mental health is real and it's very difficult. The last piece is where we started. Be very honest about the environment in which you work. If the environment is toxic, it's more likely that your self-doubt and all of these things will be more accentuated because the environment is terrible. Also know what type of leader is leading you. If you are led by the wrong leader, understand that this is just a ticking time bomb. You might have to leave that environment so that you can get your true self. But I plead with all of you, in your career, you are going to make mistakes. I've made many in my life, made many in my career. but they don't define who I am. I'm not defined by my mistakes. And a special, special message to the women leaders on the forum. Men will go and commit a very bad mistake, public mistake. The next day they're walking like all is well. Women leader makes one little mistake. She's going back to that. Hey, if I just. But in the scheme of things, it's not a big issue. We must fight this thing of putting ourselves down. An amazing example happened yesterday, just reinforces this point. There is an amazing colleague I wanted to join my team. I mean, she's brilliant. She's very good, very experienced and everything. So we send her the job description and we send her the criteria, the qualifications. There's one little thing there that's needed. We didn't even pick it up. She writes back and sends a CV and says, obviously, I don't qualify because I don't have that thing. Volunteers the information. Okay, we're happy for that you volunteered the information, but that was not the point. The point is, when we asked the people that were putting that, they say, no, that thing is not the major issue. In fact, that thing you can actually learn and then get it in 6 months and qualify and get it. But the person had already written an email that basically disqualifies her for a job that we thought, like, she is the business and we want her on board. So we must be able to deal with that. And supporting one another is very important. Supporting one another through difficulties is very important. Throughout my career, I journey with so many people who know that I'm a call away when things are tough. Sometimes they just need a phone and a conversation. And then we'll be able to deal with things. So I want to say to each and every one of you, thank you so much for joining this conversation. You've enriched it. Let us know what other topics you want us to tackle. We'll be able to tackle those. KG, sorry that we were not able to do that thing. You know, my leader, I'm still navigating with this thing. Navigating thing. So thank you so much. And to our great facilitator, Lebu, my leader, thank you so much. Thank you for making me learn more about the digital world. And I never thought I would be speaking to myself, but now I find myself to a computer. But there's no difference. It's like I'm talking to all the colleagues that are here. So thank you, each and every person, for your participation, for enriching this. We will try and save the recording, I think it's called. Yes. And then we'll put it on YouTube so that people can reach it, because I know there were people saying they couldn't get on the link. Yeah. So thank you so much and good night.
Thank you so much, my leader, and thanks to the audience, the participation, the questions that came through were very great questions, and I hope that you took one or two things that you could actually utilize when you go back or navigate in your career journey. I just want to also add on, definitely we're going to try that we move from this platform and explore YouTube so that everybody can be able to join to cater for those who aren't on Facebook. So this is still a journey that we're also going through. As Mr. Mali has said, if there's any topics that you'd like us to unpack, please certainly do send them through, whether it's direct message on Facebook, your Instagram, your LinkedIn. And also look out for, Mr. Mali never actually mentions this, but there is a website, a blog, where he actually features leaders and shares their stories. And I think, it's very great that he does that, because sometimes, there's great leaders out there that we don't even share their stories or learn from. So do look out for that. And thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed tonight's discussion. It spoke close to my heart. And I hope that everybody enjoyed the session. And do have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, guys.